the only thing I could think of when I first saw Sage was...
Fight the planet!
If you haven't seen that movie, something's missing in your life. Anyways, let's review the card in this installment of...
Is it worth it?
Hi nerds, let's jump right in. Sage is a 3 energy 0 power card that reads on reveal +2 power for each different power among all other cards here. I do want to get my overall impression, and pretty much all I would say is I think this card is better than people are giving her credit for. Like, yes, obviously she's going to be good in Surfer or negative lists.
Boring!
But that really gets tiring. Anytime anyone sees a 3-drop or any power under 2, they're like, oh, this is a negative and a Surfer card. But I think Sage could go a lot further than that. And here are the reasons why I think that. First up, she's more flexible than she seems. So I just sort of touched on this. Yes, obviously the card is good in Surfer and negative. But really think about the card and the different archetypes that people are currently playing. She fits into a bunch of them. For instance, Bounce, Ravonna, Junk, and Thanos. Bounce decks, so no one does this. I'm the only person who does this, but it works, and I promise you it's good if you try it, is Wolfsbane and Bounce decks, sometimes over Hitmonkey. Yes, Hitmonkey can get to like 10, 12 power, but if you beast a Wolfsbane back in your hand and then replay it, it's a 14 power card, let alone if you bast it. And Sage is a better Wolfsbane in my opinion, like slightly better, a little bit harder to make better, but when it is better, it's way better. So yeah, I think she's going to be awesome with Beast, Falcon, Bounce decks. And then next up, we have Ravonna. One of my dudes, writer over at MarvelSnapZone.com, Safety Blade, has put out a deck with like Angela and Havoc and Ravonna and Cannonball and Professor X. I'm sure you guys have seen it on the ladder at some point, but a deck like that, I think Sage is going to be just good in any deck that would consider Ravonna. You should probably consider Sage too. And then the next archetype here is Junk. Junk, you have the -3 from the Goblins or the Hood. You have the -8 from the other Goblin, the Big Goblin. And then all the other cards in like the Annihilus Junk type decks all have different power really, especially if you throw Debris in there, that's a 0 power. But I think Sage is going to be like a great turn 6 play in Junk decks. Because Junk decks at the moment don't really have a great turn 6 play. Usually what they're doing is playing Annihilus plus Hood on turn 6, or playing Annihilus on 5 and then whatever it is, they like a Red Hulk on turn 6. So yeah, Sage is going to be good there. And then Thanos. Thanos, you have all the stones, which are 1 power, but one of them's 3 power. And then all the other stuff you put in the deck usually has different powers. Got Psylocke at 2 power, Jeff at 3 power, Hope at 4 power, Cold Obsidian at 10, Mockingbird at 9, Thanos itself at 10, and it's easy to get all those powers on the board with Thanos. So I think Sage is actually going to be pretty good in Thanos too. All right, with all that out of the way, let's go to the second point, potential for highest power 3 cost. Now, yes, she is harder to activate than her most similar card, Wolfsbane, but if she's played correctly, and if you pull her off, she's higher power than Gladiator easily. The only other 3 power card that might get as big as Sage is maybe Sebastian Shaw, but then I think you have to put even more work to make Shaw that big. You have to like Killmonger a Nova and then Surfer and then Absorbing Man to get Shaw up to like 12, 14 power, where Sage can just do it by herself. So yeah, that's another bonus for Sage, the potential basically. And then the last one is the opponent is actively buffing Sage. This seems a little weird, but basically what I mean is anytime the opponent plays a card into a location or tries to contest a location that you're at, they're making Sage bigger just by playing the game. Now it seems kind of silly to say, but what other cards are getting bigger just by default? All of those cards are pretty good, like Angela and Kitty and blah, blah, blah. The cards that get bigger just because the game is progressing, yes, Sage is a little different than them, but basically I'm just saying like the consequence of the opponent and you playing cards is also making Sage better. All right, onto the bad parts of Sage. I've been talking it up a little bit, but there's definitely some downsides. The first up is she's not good before turn 4, probably even turn 5. At most, if you want to play this before turn 5, like on turn 4, and then you need Beast, basically. I think the only way you play Sage early is with some way to put her back in your hand. Because aside from that, she's not going to be great. So that is the downside. Having to play her on turn 6, turn 5, maybe, is definitely a restriction. The second point here is consistency. With Wolfsbane, just for example, since I brought that up already, it's very easy to make Wolfsbane a 3/7 every single time you play it. Sage is not going to have that consistency at all. And of course, that's the payoff you get for having a card that can get as big as she is for 3 energy. Of course, it's going to be a little inconsistent. Otherwise, then it's just a broken card, and what are we doing at that point? The third point here is that it's weak versus combo decks like Hela and Ongoing Tribunal. Now, I say this because those decks don't play a lot of cards out onto the board early, and Sage does count on either you putting a bunch of crap on the board or the opponent also playing a card once a turn. But yeah, Ongoing Tribunal, they stack 4 cards in one lane and win. Or Hela, they do Invisible Woman, Modok, Hela in one lane and then they win. So Sage is going to be an absolutely dead card versus those let's say ramp decks or Hela decks or ongoing decks. And then the last point I'll bring up here is the priority awkwardness. It's a little weird. If you have priority, and you play Sage, it's not going to be as big as if you didn't have priority, because the opponent's cards will reveal and then your Sage will reveal and then count the opponent's cards that were played at her location that turn. So yeah, playing her is going to be definitely a little awkward, a little inconsistent, but that's why I think the best place for her is probably somewhere like Bounce or Junk, because with Bounce you could throw priority if you have to, or you can put her back in your hand with Beast and get multiple triggers, and with Junk there's just a lot of clutter on the board anyway, so you don't really have that downside with Junk. All right, let's move on to 3 deck lists. All right, the first deck up here is right there is an Annihilus deck, and I seriously think this deck's going to be super duper good. We already know the Annihilus Ravona stuff is decent already, and usually you play Beast in Annihilus decks as a backup way to get rid of the Sentry Void. If you don't draw Annihilus, Beast is pretty critical in those decks, or Cosmo to stop the Sentry from triggering. But yeah, Annihilus decks need a second way to get rid of the Void or the Hood, and that's what Beast is for. On the upside, Beast also makes Sage a much better card. So yeah, with Kitty Pryde having a different power every turn, basically, Angela having a different power every turn, White Widow's 2, the -4 on the Widow's Kiss, whatever the hell it is, that's another power. Ravona's at 3, Green Goblin's at -3, we have a 10, a 1, a -8, and a 6. Every single card in this deck basically has different power, and you're putting cards on the opponent's side of the board. So I don't know, I just think Sage is going to be super sick in this specific shell. All right, next up we have Bounce. I keep doing it. It's so hard. Everything's mirrored. We have Bounce right there. But yeah, Bast and Sage, really awesome together. Beast and Sage, duh, awesome together. And everything in this deck is also a different power, unless you Bast it all. Obviously, everything's going to be at 3 power then. But sort of the same logic applies to the Annihilus deck as it does to the Bounce deck. Everything you have is scaling or changing power every turn, so that helps out Sage. And then you have Wolfsbane as sort of a secondary Sage, and then also Bloodstone. So this deck is going to have really big power output when it works well. And last up, the most obvious is a Negative Surfer. Yeah, it's a negative deck. I hate Mr. Negative decks, but it's obviously one of the places people are going to try to play Sage, so I figured to just make an example deck list. And this one's a little different than usual ones you would see. We have Sarah here because in the Negative Surfer list, it really sucks if you don't flip all your cards with Mr. Negative. But you can just Psylocke on turn 3 into a turn 4 Sarah, which then makes up for the downside of actually being a Mr. Negative deck. All right, on to my recommendation on whether or not you should get Sage. I know I've been talking her up. I just want to make clear she will be inconsistent, but she's just a little better than I think people are realizing right now. But ultimately, all right, so with keys, I think it's safe to spend the keys to get Sage if you don't have Legion or Tribunal. If you do have both of those, and you're not sure about Sage, I would wait a couple of days to actually open Spotlight caches. But yeah, Legion's a decent card. I know it's not being played a lot now, but it's a good card. I don't think it ever stopped being a good card. It's just not the right metagame for it, maybe. And Tribunal activates multiple combo decks, like Hela Tribunal or the ongoing Tribunal combo decks. So yeah, those two, you're not going to be upset if you get either of those in your collection. Now, as far as tokens go, do I recommend spending 6k tokens on Sage? No, probably not. If you see some creator makes a deck and Sage is super duper good in it, you could probably just use Wolfsbane as a substitution. But yeah, I can't recommend you picking up Sage unless you're near collection complete with tokens. All right, that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. Just to recap everything I said, Sage, better than I think most people think. What? But it's going to be inconsistent, and it kind of sucks to spend 6k tokens on it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Later, darts.